Welcome to GTS Car Life. I'm Thomas. 997 or 991? Today we find out which is the better Porsche 911. So, you're ready to buy a Porsche 911. If Porsche only ever built one 911, we would all love it and it would be awesome. But in fact, there are now 8 different generations of Porsche's iconic sports car. So, if you're in the market for a 911 of your own, which 911 is the best 911? Today, we compare 2 of Porsche's most popular 911 generations, models which were sold new from 2005 through 2019. But before we get into the comparison, let's take a quick look at what factors Porsche was facing at the time and how it shaped the 997 and 991. The very idea of a sports car conjures up images of a small, impractical, personal, but fun two-door car. Something more exciting, quicker, better handling, and more fun to drive than your neighbor's daily driver, and a lot more exciting to look at as well. Sports cars have always represented an expression of our love for driving, of the open road, of a certain freedom, a more personal mode of transport than what everyone else drives. But sports cars have always demanded sacrifices. They were small, noisy, rough riding, and largely impractical. But for a sports car owner, none of that mattered. In fact, the demands they required were part of what created that special bond between car and driver. The compromises were something a sports car owner accepted, the trade-offs considered more than fair for the fun driving experience, special feel, and pride of ownership received in return. Part of that experience, if your sports car was a Porsche, was having fellow 911 owners flash their lights or wave at you on the road or greet you in person with a welcome to the club. Porsche recently celebrated 75 years since they built their first car. For the first 50 years of Porsche's existence, it was known as a proud sports car manufacturer and a highly regarded engineering company, working on both its own products as well as being a contractor for other companies. Porsche was hired by companies ranging from Harley-Davidson to Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and many others. This business model allowed Porsche to grow into the beloved and admired company it is today. But things were about to change. The 90s brought about economic challenges, and governments both here and abroad would add in stiff new safety and emissions regulations. The company's bread and butter, the air-cooled 911, which would eventually reach an amazing 34 years on the market, largely unchanged, was going to have to be completely redesigned. There was no way around it. For Porsche, it also became clear that, to ensure not only the continued success, but in fact survivability, and to protect the company against unavoidable market ups and downs, as the company had struggled with more than once, that the company needed to diversify and become a full-range manufacturer. The Cayenne and Macan SUVs, which now account for over 80% of all new Porsches sold, the Panamera luxury sedan and Taycan performance sedan, and the entry-level Boxster are all products of this realization. With perspective, we can see that the 997 and 991 were shaped by and are reflections of the environment Porsche was dealing with when they were being designed and engineered. We set out before sunrise, 2 Porsche 911s over 2 days, to answer the all-important question, what is the best modern 911? On hand, representing the 997 and the last full year of 997 Carrera production, was arguably the best of its generation, a 2011 Carrera GTS, and representing the Type 991, the first of the new guard, a 2012 Carrera S. Just over 10 years ago, a buyer would have been able to walk into their local Porsche dealer and choose for themselves, either the last of the old or the first of the new. While these 2 cars look very similar to the casual observer, they are in fact very different. There are differences not only in the cars themselves, but in how they feel and in the demographic the company was appealing to. The Type 997, introduced in the United States for the 2005 model year, was incredibly important for Porsche. The 997's predecessor, the 996, introduced in the United States for 1999, had been a commercial success and was superior to the air-cooled 911s in every measurable way. But styling, quality, and engineering missteps would plague the car, and as a result would tarnish Porsche's image. The Type 997, introduced for 2005, would fix all that. The 997, and even more so the 2009 mid-cycle refresh, the 997.2, needed to be perfect. So the Type 997, which is so beloved and highly regarded today, is so because Porsche had to get it right. The company literally put everything it had into making the 997 the best 911 it had ever built. While based on the athletic and lively 996 platform, it would look better, returning to the round headlamps and more voluptuous fenders of previous 911s. It would use nicer, higher quality materials inside, wear larger 19-inch wheels and tires, and the 996's Boxster-inspired styling would be replaced with a dashboard and interior that resembled that of previous 911s, only updated. Higher quality plastics and leathers would lend a more upscale and traditional Porsche feel and would wear better over time. The 997 was further improved for the 2009 model year with an all-new engine, the 9A1, which may be the best engineered, most bulletproof engine Porsche has ever offered. Gone were the infamous IMS bearing and leaking rear main seal. Many other components, like accessory brackets, were redesigned or eliminated altogether to greatly simplify things and increase reliability. 2009 is also when Porsche replaced the robust but power-sapping Mercedes-Benz built Tiptronic automatic transmission with the incredible and lightning-quick PDK dual-clutch automated manual transmission. Porsche had painstakingly begun engineering, testing, and development work on the PDK transmission decades earlier to provide a competitive advantage for its race cars. For the first time, it will be available to the public. Now out of production for over 10 years, the 997 generation 911 is beloved and considered a modern classic. The 997 maintains enough classic 911 characteristics to earn favor and credibility from most 911 diehards, with just enough modern convenience and technology to make it truly livable as a daily driver. A Carrera GTS was introduced to the public in October 2010 as a 2011 model and represents both the end of the 997 generation and the very first ever 911 GTS model. This is a 2012 Porsche 911 Carrera S. The 2012 Porsche 911, known as Type 991, is the 911 model that followed the 997. The 991.2 refresh was introduced for the 2017 model year and sold through 2019, when it would be replaced by the new and even larger Type 992. The 991 was the first 911 to be designed after the incredibly successful launch of Porsche's first SUV, the 2003 Cayenne. It brought a larger, lightweight structure utilizing more aluminum parts than any 911 before, and its stretched footprint and 4-inch longer wheelbase allowed for even greater performance, capability, and a smoother ride. While the 991 would use a slightly updated version of the 981 engine from the 997.2, the 2017 991.2 would see a switch to a smaller 3-liter flat-six engine with dual turbochargers. This was a largely unpopular move among Porsche diehards and a major shift for the 911. For the first time, Porsche would not be offering a naturally aspirated engine for any non-track focused 911 model. But Porsche would no longer be satisfied to rely on old-school sports car diehards. In order to ensure the company's financial success and viability long into the future, the company would need to transition from a successful little niche sports car maker into a company whose product range had widespread appeal. Even the iconic 911 would need to demand fewer sacrifices from its owners in order to attract even more potential buyers. Us car people can be a very finicky bunch, and it's much safer for any automobile manufacturer to cast a wider net to ensure commercial viability. At first glance, the 997 and 991 look very similar, and it's not uncommon to confuse them on the road, especially from the front. This is of course intentional. Only the rear of the 991, with its well-disguised rear spoiler and indented triangle-shaped tail lamps, distinguishes this model as something different. Porsche hasn't strayed from the basic teardrop-shaped flat six-cylinder rear engine 2+2 design for 60 years now. As someone who wanted to be an automotive designer early on, I imagine it must be incredibly difficult to be employed as a designer for Porsche and tasked with creating the next 911. How do you create a compelling, desirable new vehicle when your hands are almost completely tied? The average person probably can't tell the difference between a Type 997 or 991 on the road. They both say 911. There's no mistake in that. What truly separates these two versions of the 911 is feel. The 997 and 991 may look very similar on paper, but the character of these two models is so different. The specifications don't really tell the whole story. On paper, the difference between the 997 and 991 are not that great and are even comparable with the 993. The 991 and its replacement, the 992, while still 911s, are much larger when measured by volume. But what the spec sheet doesn't tell you is the total volume of the 991 body. Think young Elvis versus old Elvis. His height may have been the same, but there were a whole lot of differences in between. In the 997, a driver can easily touch a passenger side door. Not so in the 991. The 997 just feels more intimate, more personal, more sports car. While the width is similar, the total length is over 2 inches longer, and the wheelbase, in fact, a full 4 inches longer, the 991 feels so much bigger, because in many ways it is. Upon close examination, the 997 looks and feels like a quality design throughout. Body panels are stamped with care and a high level of fit and finish. Plastics and leathers used are a considerable upgrade from the previous 996. It's evident that Porsche as a company finally had enough money to do what they wanted and weren't forced to cut corners as they were when they engineered the 996. The 997 looks high-end and wears well. Like a great watch, custom suit, or your favorite pair of Lucchese boots, This 997 is 12 years old now and has over 65,000 miles, but still looks and performs like a new car. It's all 911, just an improved version. All the important bits are present and accounted for. A naturally aspirated 3.8 liter flat six, hydraulic power steering, a hand lever actuated manual parking brake, 5 round dials with actual gauges, a metal sunroof, and an accessible engine compartment. The outstanding hydraulic steering system on the 997 really communicates exactly what's going on with the front end. I love it. And I really appreciate a traditional ratchet type parking brake. The overall dimensions of the 997 are only slightly greater than the final air-cooled model, the 993. Much of the style and feel from the 993 carries over to the 997, including the very pleasing rounded edges and features, curved fenders with wider hips, a steel sunroof, built-in automatically raising rear spoiler, more pronounced door sills and grab-style door handles. The front trunk is spacious enough for grocery shopping, duffel bags, helmets, or your children's school backpacks. Gone is the spare tire of previous 911s, replaced with an air compressor and a can of Fix-A-Flat. In my 997, I carry a plug kit because the last thing I want to do is squirt Fix-A-Flat into my tires. Around back, the engine compartment is accessible as it has been in all 911s since the beginning. Inside, the 997 abandons the modern oval themes of the 996, returning to more traditional 911 styling cues. The 997 offers a well-tailored interior. It feels like a modernized version of the old, original 911. There is no doubt the 997 is a 911, with its roots based in the past, but brought up to more modern standards. The 997 is vastly more capable than the old 911, but more usable as a daily driver, with advantages like strong air conditioning, a bit more room for driver and passenger, and a significant improvement in safety equipment. The top of the dashboard emphasizes its horizontal design and mimics the dash pad of the past, and the requisite 5 dials are present and accounted for, laid out horizontally in front of the driver, with the tachometer taking center stage. The vertical center console remains and is enlarged over the 993. I feel the dashboard is beautifully put together. The styling, it's very consistent. It feels one piece, it feels integrated, and I think it's aged really well. Power window switches, which in the 996 had been reduced to one pair, placed on the center console to save money, are now returned to the door panels. The feeling inside a 997 is of quality, familiarity, and tidiness, but with much welcomed improvements in ergonomics. A weakness on the air-cooled model for decades, the dashboard and other interior controls are now well laid out and logical, and anyone can figure out how to operate them without reading pages of instruction manuals. Legroom, too, is improved over the 996, and headroom, hip room, and elbow room are more than satisfactory for a sports car. The small rear seats are surprisingly useful for taking along unexpected passengers or cargo, and the seat backs can be folded for larger items such as golf bags. I've been daily driving a 911 since I bought my first, a 2003 996.2 that I reviewed on this channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and liking below so you won't miss our next episode. These cars are amazingly practical. A 911 does everything I need my car to do. On the road, there's literally no other car that offers the same experience as a rear-engine 911. These cars sound unique, feel unique, and provide a special experience you won't find anywhere else. Regarded as the driver's 911, the GTS model has Porsche's Sport exhaust, which can reduce exhaust noise for sneaking out early in the morning or open up the valves for full aural enjoyment. The GTS is rated at 408 horsepower versus the 385 for the 997 Carrera S. However, the extra horsepower is barely noticeable in daily driving and hardly registers in 0 to 60 times. Both the 997 and 991 turn in 0 to 60 times with PDK of about 4 seconds. Manual transmission models take around 0.4 of a second more. Porsche achieved the 23 horsepower increase through a complex and very expensive series of mostly intake and exhaust changes, which were also available on the S by selecting the power kit option for $16,900. The main difference is much more linear torque delivery, which helps keep the engine in its torque band on track. So the power kit equipped 911 won't dramatically lower your stoplight drag times, but will increase your driving satisfaction and lower your all-important lap times. Porsche has always placed great importance on class-leading reliability and winning lap times. All 911s transmit a high degree of road and tire noise. The 997 is no exception. The upside is you aren't likely to find yourself nodding off to sleep behind the wheel of any 911. The downside is placing and receiving phone calls, even with a built-in Bluetooth connection, is never more than barely acceptable. I suppose that's what they make Lexus and Cadillacs for. I regularly make 3 and 4 hour drives in my 997. The seats are supportive and comfortable, especially with the optional heating and ventilation. Visibility, long a hallmark of 911 design, is excellent. There are no real blind spots, and the mirrors are well placed and useful. I'm 6 foot 3 inches tall and have more than enough headroom, even with a Stetson hat or my race helmet. And I do wear my race helmet often, as an instructor at the Circuit of the Americas Formula 1 track in Austin, which brings me to just how amazing the 997 drives on track. Earlier, air-cooled 911s were a handful, tail-happy and known to transition from suddenly pushing to uncontrollable oversteer. Even my 996 pushed something awful through turns, required me to take measures to force the issue. The 997 is a dream. The 911's class-leading hydraulic steering communicates beautifully, feeling connected at all times, never leaving any doubt what's going on. The chassis is planted and very neutral. Turning requires nothing more than pointing the steering wheel in the direction you want to go. Driving at the limit is almost child's play, and it's so easy to turn in fast, smooth, and consistent laps. Porsche really nailed it with the 997 chassis. And although I've only owned manual transmission sports cars before this 997, I have to admit PDK is far superior on track. And a PDK-equipped 911 sounds simply amazing under full acceleration. The 997 is a great 911, and Porsche clearly spared no expense in getting the details right. The 991 feels very different. This is a 2012 Porsche 911 Carrera S, known as Type 991. This is the 911 model that followed the 997. The 991 was the first all-new 911 to be designed after the incredibly successful launch of Porsche's first SUV, the 2003 Cayenne. This generation marked a cultural shift for Porsche, which going forward will be under the influence of the Volkswagen Group. Whereas the 997 was a chance to fix the sins of the 996 and firmly reestablish the brand's reputation for excellence, the 991 was the beginning of making the 911 more appealing to the masses. This was a sports car that would lessen the demands a sports car makes on its owners. This new 911 would still perform like a 911 for sure, even better in many ways. Statistically more capable, but also less playful, the 991 lost a lot of that traditional sports car feel. The car is longer by more than 2 inches. The wheelbase is stretched by 4 inches, and the wheels are now 20 inches, up from 19 on the 997 and 18 on the 996. On paper, the largest difference is the 4-inch longer wheelbase. But that hardly tells the story. That lengthened wheelbase changes the character of this 911, something that Porsche would later try to lessen with the addition of rear axle steer. But it's more than just the way it turns. The 991 just looks and feels so much larger, outside and inside. This is the first 911 whose character says sports coupe instead of sports car. Stylistically, the designers strayed further from the original concept than ever before. Gone are the pleasing, round, nicely finished details of previous 911s. Fenders, doors, windows, even the rollover onto the roof are noticeably more flat. There's evidence of cost savings throughout the car. Pressings for body panels, as well as smaller components like switches, storage lids, and dashboard components, are simplified and minimized in the interest of production line efficiency and cost cutting. Another area where Porsche did not exactly improve things, there's no place to store a cell phone conveniently here inside the car. In the 997, you've got a nice slot beneath the radio where you can put things like a cell phone. The only place you can put one here is on the seat or in the door pockets. This obvious effort to cut parts and production costs recalls the overriding directive that dictated how Porsche designed the 996. Gone too is the built-in rear spoiler, which contained engine cooling vents and automatically raised at speed. A staple of Carrera design, first seen on the Type 964 of 1989, the new, lower-cost solution is to simply raise the entire rear end panel. Among the negative side effects are ugly cut lines through the rear fenders, which many will agree has always been one of the most beautiful pieces of sculpture on any 911, and it looks very unattractive from behind when the entire back of the car opens up at speed. Ever more stringent fuel, emissions, and safety standards call for increasing gadgets, features, sensors, and computers. Porsche engineers need to put that somewhere, so they did, mostly stacked on top of each other, and the designers, unable to stray from the basic, now 60-year-old design, simply bloated the shape to make room. The front cross-section is so much larger, the windshield more slanted back to compensate and help aerodynamics, the previously graceful and pleasantly rounded sides now more upright and simplified, and the rear, which used to drop so uniquely down to the bumper, is now much closer to the horizontal, creating a tall rear section that no other 911 ever had. The designers pulled out some time-tested techniques from their bag of tricks in an effort to disguise and balance this larger, bloated volume. The front parking lamps, typically smaller horizontal units on previous 911s, are now exceptionally wide, stretched out affairs, which were probably intended to mimic the front lamps and grille assembly on the earliest 911s. The larger 20-inch wheels also help maintain a balance with the new, bigger body. But there are still more cost-cutting measures to be found. The increased volume in the rear creates a large, relatively vertical area that isn't very 911-like and necessitates some kind of cover. Porsche went with a single, very large polyurethane cover, which comes across as an inelegant and low-rent solution. The rather plain and uninspired taillight lenses don't help. And of course, that hidden rear spoiler. The new optional sunroof trades the beautiful metal roof that had been used in every single 911 before for an ugly, sliding roof panel. It looks clean when the roof is closed, but destroys the 911's beautiful silhouette and is a real eyesore when opened. It's an obvious money-saving measure for Porsche and screams of production line efficiency over superior product. The 997 has a traditional steel sunroof, which slides back or vents up. On the 991, you get this one-piece thing that makes the outside look really unattractive. Inside, the styling on the 991 is clearly borrowed from the Panamera, Porsche's luxury sedan. The dashboard is noticeably larger and higher as a result of the higher cowl. The small, tidy center stack and console of the 997 and earlier 911s now replaced by a large, downward sweeping center stack and console combination. This design might make a large sedan or SUV feel more sporty, but in a sports car it has the opposite effect. And to make things worse, the endless row of plastic switches that again look nice enough in an SUV or sedan feel completely out of character in a 911. Reaching the passenger side door handles from the driver's seat is not the easy job that it is in the 997 and previous 911s. The feel is again more luxury coupe and less sports car. The headlamp switch and ignition key insert, previously two separate units, are now combined into one cheap-looking plastic insert. Details like this recall the thinking behind Porsche's much-hated fried egg headlamps, where previously separate components were combined into one less expensive and easier to install piece. A sports car should have a manual handbrake. This car here, they moved it. For the 991, they moved it to an electronic button, which just feels completely out of place on a sports car. Another thing is the key. So I'm a big fan of keyless entry. It works great. I love when you walk up, pull on the handle, and that's fantastic. But for some reason, unless you pay extra on top of your $100,000+ sports car, you get the fob, but it doesn't work keyless. So you've got to take this and stick it into this really ugly hole right here on the dashboard and twist it over to make the car work. What's the reason for that, Porsche? Porsche's playbook has long included offering high-level customization and personalization for buyers with especially deep pockets, and the 991 generation took this to a whole new level. It is more common than ever before to find unique and special touches in 991 models, and around this time, Porsche was claiming that they had never produced more than 2 identical 911s. This combination of cutting costs, while also adding a virtually endless list of very high-priced and personalized options, helped Porsche become one of the most successful and profitable car companies in the world. The interior of a 991 can really be a very special, high-end and luxurious place if spec'd right. And of course, this change is something Porsche has continued and increased even more so with the new 992. On the road, a 991 drives very differently from the 997. That stretched wheelbase, larger wheels and big car details inside combine to create a sense of driving a much larger car. More capable of the limits, yes, but not as much fun. The 991 feels more luxury sports coupe than small, raw sports car. The electric power steering introduced for this model feels very disconnected and very much like driving a video game. It goes where you point it, and the chassis capabilities are exceptional, as you expect from a 911, but it just feels fake. The steering doesn't provide the satisfaction that has for so long been a hallmark of a Porsche 911. I will say, steering feel has been greatly improved in later year 991s. Another letdown is the manipulated engine sounds literally being piped into the cabin from what Porsche called a sound symposer. This only adds to the feel of driving a video game. It's a similar gimmick to those used on much less expensive cars these days, but disappointing in a 911. While we're on the subject of letdowns, it just feels so long for the traditional parking brake to be eliminated in favor of an electric switch. How would this type of emergency brake be used in an actual emergency? On the 991, you get electric power steering that feels like an arcade game and a push-button parking brake key thingy. And finally, it feels wrong to open the hood on a 991 and see a plastic cover, exhaust fan, a fluid fill, but no engine. Porsche's answer is that with all the additional equipment that's been forced into the body and piled on top of the engine, it would not be possible to see the engine anyway. I'm sure they're right, but this just further dilutes that sports car feel that's so important in, well, a sports car. From a styling standpoint, you can see how Porsche's designers began the transition from the smaller air-cooled cars of the past to today's larger bodies that need to contain a lot more technology. In fact, if you look at a cutaway of the newest 911, the 992, you'll see there's a lot of stuff stacked up in the back, and they really need to have a lot more height. The spec sheet says the 991 is the best 911 to date, better than its predecessors. I don't doubt that, but just as so many drivers prefer an old-school manual transmission over the faster, arguably better PDK dual-clutch transmission, so it is with these two 911s. The difference really is in the details. If we were only basing this test on performance, the newest 911 would be the winner. It always is. Porsche doesn't have a habit of replacing any 911 with a poorer performing one. But the question here was, which 911 is the best sports car? Which 911 is the best 911? At the end of the day, both of these cars are great cars. They're both 911s. And I'll take a 911 over most any other car any day of the week. The question is, which 911 does a better job of being a real Porsche? To me, the 997 is the epitome of the 911. What's your take? I'd love to hear your opinion. Is the 997 the best 911? Or 991? Or maybe a different model? Please tell me in the comments below. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notifications bell. It really makes a difference, and I appreciate your support. Let me know in the comments below which 911 you think is a better Porsche. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and liking below so you won't miss our next episode. Have fun, stay safe, and I'll see you out there.